He came to shut the port down and became the most wanted man inside it. The helicopter didn't land so much as impose itself. Its rotors shredded the morning air above the port, scattering gulls and dust, flattening loose papers, and rattling the metal skins of containers stacked 6 stories high. Below, the terminal stretched like an industrial organism, rails embedded in concrete, cranes frozen mid-gesture, cables humming with latent power. This place never slept. It only slowed, briefly, between shifts. Adrian Hale watched it all from above with professional detachment. The port was impressive, yes, but that wasn't the same as viable. On his tablet, the numbers told a cleaner story. Margins narrowing, maintenance costs rising, political friction, environmental pressure. Too many variables for an asset that could be liquidated, relocated, replaced. He didn't hate places like this. He simply didn't romanticize them. Touchdown in 30 seconds, the pilot said. Adrian didn't respond. He adjusted his cufflinks instead. White gold, understated, expensive in a way that never asked for attention. The jacket fit him perfectly. It always did. His appearance was not vanity. It was armor. Control began with presentation. The skids hit concrete. The helicopter settled. Before the rotors had fully slowed, Adrian was already standing. He stepped out into the noise and smell of the port, the sharp ozone of welding, heated grease, and the heavy, stagnant scent of low tide hitting the concrete. His shoes touched the ground carefully, as if the surface itself were provisional. That was when the voice reached him. "You're early." Not deferential, not cautious. Adrian paused, more out of curiosity than anything else, and turned. The woman standing near the edge of the landing pad didn't belong to the welcoming committee. No suit, no tablet, no nervous smile. She wore work boots scarred by years of abuse, dark cargo pants, and a high-visibility vest thrown on like an afterthought. A hard hat was tucked under her arm. Her hair was pulled back tight, practical, uncompromising. Her eyes were already on him, steady, sharp, openly hostile. "You must be Adrian Hale," she said. "Because no one else would land a private helicopter here just to kill a terminal." That got his attention, not because it was offensive, but because it was efficient. "I'm on a schedule," Adrian said evenly. "If you have something relevant to say, be concise." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Good. Then here it is. You shut this place down, and you don't just cut steel. You cut people. Routes. Contracts that don't reroute cleanly. Supply chains that keep entire districts alive." He glanced past her, already scanning the perimeter, the cranes, the access roads. "You are Teresa Morales, head of operations." She stepped closer, deliberately placing herself in his path. "I run this port. Not from reports. From the ground." Adrian looked at her properly now. Not as a threat. As a factor. "You should have requested a meeting through corporate," he said. "I did," she replied. 6 times. You declined all of them. Then this conversation is redundant." She laughed, short, humorless. "That's what people say when they're used to not being told no." Adrian checked his watch. "This terminal is being decommissioned due to inefficiency and strategic redundancy. The decision was made months ago. My presence here is procedural." "Procedural," she repeated. "Is that what you call it when 800 people lose their jobs?" He met her gaze, unblinking. "Yes." That was the moment something shifted between them. Not anger, not drama, but alignment. 2 immovable positions locking into place. "You don't even know how this place works," Teresa said. "You've read reports. Spreadsheets. You haven't walked the lower yards during night shift. You haven't rerouted cargo during a storm when 3 cranes went offline at once." "I don't need to," Adrian replied. "If a system requires heroics to function, it's already failing." Her jaw tightened. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I believe," he said calmly, "that emotional attachment clouds judgment." She stepped even closer now, close enough that he could smell oil on her gloves, coffee on her breath. "And I believe," she said, "that men like you don't feel the damage until it's happening to you." For a brief, almost imperceptible instant, something flickered behind Adrian's eyes. Not guilt, recognition. Then it was gone. "This discussion is over," he said, stepping around her. "You'll receive formal notice by close of business." Teresa watched him walk away, spine straight, pace unhurried, already dictating notes into his tablet as if she hadn't existed at all. To him, she was noise. To her, he was a weapon with a human face. She didn't know yet that within hours, the gates of the port would close. Not for cargo, not for inspections, but for him. And Adrian Hale, who had built his entire life on distance, leverage, and control, was about to learn what it meant to be trapped inside the machinery he thought he could dismantle from above. The gates shut with a sound Adrian had never associated with inconvenience. It wasn't dramatic, no alarms, no shouting, but the hydraulic locks engaged with a final, metallic certainty that echoed through the yard. A low vibration traveled up through the concrete, into the soles of his shoes. Adrian stopped walking mid-sentence, his tablet still raised, the last dictated note unfinished. Confirmed transfer of. The signal dropped. He frowned, tapped the screen once, then again. No connection. No cellular. Even satellite fallback failed to initialize. That, more than anything, irritated him. Infrastructure failures were supposed to happen to other people. He looked up. Across the yard, the main vehicle gate was sealed. 2 security trucks idled in front of it, engines running, lights off. Men in port security uniforms stood nearby, not relaxed, not aggressive, just alert, waiting. Adrian turned slowly. Teresa Morales hadn't followed him immediately. She had given him space, allowed him the illusion of departure. Now she was walking toward him from the opposite side of the yard, her steps measured, unhurried, as if time had finally tilted in her favor. "You can open that gate," Adrian said, his voice flat. "Now." Teresa stopped a few meters away. "I can," she replied. "I won't. This is unlawful detention." She nodded. "That's what your legal team will argue." Later, he studied her face, searching for tells. Panic, overreach, emotion. He found none. Only focus. "You're making a serious mistake," he said. "You think a temporary delay changes the outcome? It doesn't. The decision stands." "It does," Teresa said. "But the narrative doesn't." She gestured, and only then did Adrian notice the additional presence around the yard. A white van near the administrative building. Unmarked, but familiar in shape. 2 men stepped out, followed by a woman with a camera slung over her shoulder. "Press." "What is this?" Adrian asked quietly. "A stunt?" "No," Teresa said. "It's a reckoning." Before he could respond, another vehicle rolled in through a secondary access point. Police this time. Local jurisdiction. 2 officers exited, hands resting casually near their belts, expressions neutral but curious. One of them approached Adrian. "Sir, we need you to remain on site for questioning." "On what grounds?" "An incident reported this morning," the officer said. "Potential regulatory violations. We're still gathering details." Adrian turned back to Teresa. "You filed a report." "I documented irregularities," she corrected. "Things corporate was happy to overlook while profits were good." "You're bluffing." "No," she said again. "I'm escalating." Adrian exhaled slowly through his nose. This was no longer inefficient. It was dangerous. Not legally, not yet, but reputationally. The press was already filming. He could almost hear the headlines forming. "Corporate executive detained at port amid shutdown controversy." He straightened his jacket, adjusted his cuffs. "Control. Always control. I want my counsel present," he said to the officer. "You can make the call once we relocate you to the admin building." Relocate. Another word he disliked. As they walked, Teresa fell into step beside him. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to be heard. "You should have taken the meeting," she said quietly. "You think this changes anything?" Adrian replied under his breath. "It doesn't save your port. It buys time," she said. "And time is where systems like yours get sloppy." He stopped, turning to face her fully now, ignoring the officers for a moment. "You don't understand how this ends." Teresa met his gaze without flinching. "You don't understand how this begins." For the first time since arriving, Adrian felt it. Not fear, not anger, but the unmistakable sensation of leverage slipping. He was inside the frame now, no longer above it. Subject to processes he didn't design, optics he couldn't immediately suppress. As the doors of the administrative building closed behind him, sealing out the noise of the port, Adrian realized something else, colder and more unsettling. Teresa Morales hadn't tried to defeat him. She had tried to contain him. And containment, unlike opposition, was a strategy that worked best on people who believed they were untouchable. The administrative building was never meant to hold someone like Adrian for long. The walls were thin, the windows reinforced but scratched from decades of salt wind and careless machinery. The air smelled faintly of oil and damp paper. He sat alone in a narrow office while outside. The port continued to breathe, cranes groaning, metal clanging, engines idling. An organism that did not care about executive authority or board resolutions. The police questioning had been deliberately vague. Too vague. No charges, no formal accusation, just enough procedural fog to keep him exactly where his enemies wanted him. His phone was returned, but useless. Every call routed through local networks that stalled, dropped, or went unanswered. His legal team was on the way. Everything was always on the way when someone wanted you immobilized. Adrian didn't pace. He never paced. He stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, eyes tracking movement across the yard with the precision of someone used to reading systems, not people. That was when he saw it. A convoy turning toward one of the remote storage zones, far from the main terminal. Unmarked trucks. Too clean. Too deliberate. His jaw tightened. Someone was accelerating the timeline. The door opened without a knock. Teresa stepped inside and closed it behind her. No guards followed. That alone told him more than any report could have. They moved already, Adrian said, not turning around. Yes, Teresa replied. That means they're done pretending. He faced her now. This wasn't your plan. No, she said. This is what happens when someone panics. Adrian crossed the room in 3 measured steps. There's contraband in the port. Teresa's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. What kind? Enough to justify a public arrest. Enough to burn everything connected to this terminal. He paused. And to make my signature on the closure order look like a cover-up. Silence settled between them, thick and heavy. Teresa exhaled slowly, then laughed once, short, humorless. So that's it. They're going to bury the port and you under the same pile of evidence. They already planted it, Adrian said. If I leave the perimeter, I'm escorted straight into a narrative I don't control. And if you stay, she said, they'll escalate. Yes. Teresa leaned back against the desk, arms crossed. Then you finally understand something. What's that? You're trapped, she said. Just like the rest of us. For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. This was the point where most men argued, threatened, offered money. He didn't. He recalculated. Pride was a luxury for people with exits. I need you, he said. The words landed between them like a dropped tool, loud in their simplicity. Teresa raised an eyebrow. Say that again. I need you. Adrian repeated evenly. You know the blind spots. The informal routes. The people who don't show up on org charts. You're asking me to hide you. I'm asking you to help me survive long enough to dismantle whoever set this up. And in return, she asked. He met her gaze. You get a binding legal guarantee that the terminal will not be shut down. Not delayed. Not reviewed. Preserved. Teresa pushed off the desk and stepped closer. I don't want a promise. You'll get more than that. I want a signed instrument, she said. Preliminary injunction. Triggered if anything happens to you. Filed with an independent escrow. Adrian didn't hesitate. Done. And full access to your internal audit trail, she added. Every contractor, every shell, every consultant tied to this decision. That's proprietary. So is my port, Teresa shot back. Another pause. Then Adrian nodded once. Agreed. She studied him now, really studied him, as if trying to see whether this man, this polished, distant figure she had despised on sight, was capable of honoring a deal made under pressure. Last condition, she said. If I do this, you follow my rules. No orders. No hierarchy. In here, you're just another problem I have to manage. Adrian reached into his jacket, removed a pen and a folded document. He signed without ceremony, the paper resting on the scarred desk between oil stains and old coffee rings. When he slid it toward her, their fingers brushed briefly. Neither acknowledged it. Teresa took the paper, folded it once, and tucked it into her jacket. Congratulations, she said. You just made the most important deal of your career. Why? Adrian asked. She opened the door. Because you signed it in a place that smells like failure. People tend to remember those promises. She led him out through a service corridor, down a narrow stairwell, past doors that hadn't been opened in years. The sounds of the port grew louder, closer, more intimate. This wasn't the sanitized version from investor decks. This was the machinery beneath. As they stepped into a cramped, dimly lit utility shack tucked between containers, Teresa turned to him one last time. "From this moment on," she said, "you don't exist." Adrian nodded, and for the first time in his life, disappearing felt less like a loss of power and more like the beginning of learning where it truly lived. The railcar office had been dead for years before Teresa brought Adrian there. It sat on a forgotten spur at the edge of the terminal, a rusted steel rectangle half swallowed by weeds and stacked containers, its windows clouded with grime and salt. No cameras covered this stretch of track. The angle was wrong, the lighting unreliable, the maintenance logs out of date. It was the kind of place inspectors forgot and smugglers avoided. Too small to matter, too inconvenient to use. Perfect. Teresa unlocked the side door with a key that looked older than both of them. The hinges complained as the door opened, releasing a breath of stagnant air, dry rot, and the lingering bitterness of old tobacco. Inside, the space was barely wider than a shipping container office. A narrow desk bolted to the floor, two mismatched chairs, a steel locker, and a sagging couch that had once been vinyl and now felt like compressed cardboard. "This is it," she said. "Welcome to the blind zone." Adrian stepped inside and stopped. There were no screens greeting him, no ambient hum of climate control. Just silence punctured by the distant echo of cranes and the occasional horn from the docks. He removed his coat, folded it carefully, and placed it on the back of the chair, an instinctive gesture of order in a place defined by neglect. "You'll hate it," Teresa added. "That's the point." He ran a hand along the wall, fingers coming away dusty. "How long has this been in use?" "Officially," she said, 7 years. "And unofficially?" "Longer." She showed him the basics without ceremony. The cold water sink fed by an old pipe that rattled before delivering anything resembling pressure. The portable heater that worked if kicked in exactly the right place. The breaker switch that powered a single lamp and a pair of aging monitors connected to an obsolete security feed. "No Wi-Fi," Teresa said. "No internal network access. If you want to communicate, we do it my way." "Analog," Adrian said. She smirked. "Welcome back to the 20th century." That first night stripped him faster than any interrogation ever had. The couch was too short. His feet hung over the edge. The blanket smelled faintly of oil and detergent. The cold crept in through seams in the metal walls, settling into his bones. Every sound felt amplified. The clang of containers, the shudder of passing trains, the distant voices of workers finishing late shifts. He didn't sleep. Teresa sat at the desk, boots kicked off, watching the monitors with the quiet focus of someone who'd done this for most of her adult life. In the dim light, without her earlier fury, she looked different. Older, sharper, carved by responsibility rather than ambition. "You can still walk away," she said without turning. "No," Adrian replied. "Good," she said, "because they're already looking." Over the next 2 days, routine replaced shock. Adrian learned when the yard was loud enough to mask movement, when patrols grew lazy, which forklifts belonged to men who asked questions and which belonged to men who didn't. Teresa moved through the port like it was an extension of her body, reading vibrations through the floor, understanding the rhythm of labor in a way he'd never seen mapped in any report. In return, she watched him adapt. He didn't complain. He asked precise questions. He took notes by hand. He memorized schedules, names, inconsistencies. When one of the monitors flickered and died, he dismantled it with practiced care, salvaging just enough functionality to reroute the feed through an external drive. "You've done this before," Teresa said. "Not like this," he replied. "But systems are systems. They fail in patterns." On the third night, exhaustion finally caught him. He sat on the edge of the couch, tie discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, staring at nothing. "I used to think places like this were interchangeable," he said quietly. "Ports, plants, terminals, assets." Teresa didn't look at him. "And now I see the friction," he said. "The people, the delays no model accounts for." She nodded once. "That friction is why this place survives." Silence stretched, but it wasn't hostile anymore. Just shared. For the first time, Teresa wasn't looking at a corporate executioner. She was looking at a man out of his element, forced to confront the cost of decisions he'd only ever seen as numbers. And for the first time, Adrian understood that the blind zone wasn't just a place without cameras. It was a place where masks stopped working. Night in the port did not mean silence. It meant a different language. The cranes never fully stopped. Somewhere steel scraped against steel, chains rattled, engines idled at low RPMs like animals refusing to sleep. Sodium lamps washed the container stacks in dull amber, leaving deep black corridors between them, places where cameras existed on paper but not in practice. The old security substation sat beneath the railcar office like a forgotten nerve center. Teresa led Adrian down a narrow metal staircase, each step groaning under their weight. The room below smelled of dust, overheated plastic, and stale coffee. A single desk faced a wall of outdated monitors, their images grainy and slightly misaligned. "This is where the port actually breathes," Teresa said. "Nobody important's been down here in years." Adrian studied the screens. Dock C, Warehouse 14, the fuel intake lane. He noticed the delays immediately, feeds lagging by seconds, sometimes minutes. "These timestamps don't match," he said. "They never do," Teresa replied. "You learn the drift." She handed him a chipped mug filled with something that might once have been coffee. He hesitated, then drank. It was terrible. He drank again anyway. They worked in near silence, shoulders occasionally brushing in the cramped space. There was no room for distance here, no polished boardroom table to separate them. Every movement required awareness of the other person's body. Adrian began mapping patterns in his notebook. Shift overlaps. Unlogged vehicle movements. A forklift that appeared too often near sealed containers. A guard who took breaks at mathematically convenient moments. "You're not watching the screens," Teresa observed. "I am," Adrian said. "Just not the images." She leaned closer, eyes tracing his notes. "You see behavior. I see incentives." For the first time, she smiled. Not mockingly, not sharply. With interest. Hours passed. The kind of hours that erased the concept of time. The lamp buzzed softly overhead. Teresa shifted in her chair, stretching stiff muscles. Adrian loosened his collar, the corporate armor finally abandoned. "You ever sleep?" she asked. "In hotels," he said. "Planes. Offices. That's not an answer." He glanced at her. In the dim light, her face looked softer, the anger worn thin by fatigue. "Sleep is inefficient when you're behind." She snorted quietly. "That explains a lot." At some point, a monitor flickered, just a fraction too long. Adrian straightened instantly. "There," he said. "Run that again." Teresa rewound the feed. A container door. Closed. Then open. Then closed again. No record in the manifest. "That bay's assigned to sealed inventory," she said. "No one's supposed to touch it." Adrian's jaw tightened. Someone did. And they knew exactly when not to be seen. The realization settled between them, heavy and electric. They weren't guessing anymore. They were circling something real. Outside, footsteps echoed briefly above them, then faded. Teresa's hand moved instinctively to the radio at her belt. Adrian didn't speak. He didn't need to. The tension in his posture mirrored her own. "They're tightening the net," she whispered. He nodded. "Which means we're close." For a moment, the space felt impossibly small. The warmth of her arm against his. The shared breath. The unspoken knowledge that if one of them made a mistake, there would be no press release clean enough to erase the consequences. Teresa broke the silence first. "You're different at night." "So are you," Adrian replied. She looked at him, really looked. Not at the CEO who arrived in a helicopter, not at the man who signed destruction orders. At someone focused, alert, stripped down to competence and will. "Don't make me regret helping you," she said quietly. "I won't," he answered. No hesitation. No qualifiers. When dawn was still hours away, they were no longer just hiding together. They were hunting. The port changed before it announced itself. It wasn't alarms or sirens. It was absence. Radios went quiet on one channel. Then another. The low, constant background chatter, the lifeblood of dock operations, thinned until it felt deliberately edited. Teresa noticed first. She froze mid-step, one hand still resting on the metal railing above the security substation. Her head tilted slightly, listening not to sound, but to its pattern. "They're moving," she said. Adrian closed his notebook. "Not officially. No. This is off-ledger." They didn't waste time debating. Teresa killed the substation lights manually, plunging the room into darkness broken only by the dim glow of emergency LEDs and the monitors. She slung her backpack over one shoulder and motioned for Adrian to follow. "Tunnel access," she whispered. Now, they slipped out through the rear maintenance hatch and into a service corridor that smelled of wet limestone and the metallic tang of oxidized iron. Pipes ran along the ceiling like exposed veins, some warm, some cold. Their footsteps echoed too loudly for comfort. Adrian adjusted his pace to match hers. He wasn't built for this environment. Not physically, not by habit, but he refused to slow her down. He watched how she moved. Efficient, economical, already mapping exits in her head. Ahead, the corridor dropped into a sloping passage reinforced with rusted steel ribs. The tunnel led beneath the primary dock lanes, a forgotten artery used only during inspections and emergencies. Who are these people? Adrian asked quietly. Contractors, Teresa said. Unofficial, the kind that don't file reports. And they're looking for me. They're looking to erase you. A shadow crossed the tunnel mouth behind them. Voices, low, controlled, professional. Teresa cursed under her breath and pulled Adrian to the side as a flashlight beam swept across the concrete where they'd stood seconds earlier. They moved deeper. The air grew colder. Moisture dripped steadily from the ceiling, tapping against metal grates underfoot. At a junction where the tunnel opened into a vertical service shaft, Teresa stopped. This is it, she said. We go up. Adrian looked at the ladder bolted into the wall. It disappeared into darkness above. How high? High enough that if you slip, you won't walk it off. She didn't wait for agreement. She started climbing. Adrian followed, hands already slick with sweat. The ladder vibrated faintly, movement below. Someone had entered the tunnel. Halfway up, Teresa's boot slipped on a wet rung. The sound was small, but final. Adrian reacted without thinking. He reached up, gripping her ankle, anchoring himself against the ladder despite the strain tearing through his shoulders. Don't move, he said through clenched teeth. Her breath hitched. For the first time since this began, fear cracked through her control. I've got you, he said. Louder now. Certain. She adjusted slowly, finding purchase. When she was stable, she looked down at him, really looked, and nodded once. They finished the climb in silence. The hatch above opened into an unfinished platform overlooking a container yard. Wind rushed in, carrying the smell of diesel and cold seawater. Below them, engines started. Lights flared to life. They're sweeping, Teresa said. Sector by sector. Adrian scanned the yard. Forklifts, security vehicles, men in dark jackets moving with intent. There's no clean exit, he said. There never is. They crossed the platform quickly, ducking behind stacked pallets and steel frames. At the far end, the structure narrowed, forcing them onto an exposed catwalk running parallel to the yard. Halfway across, a shout rang out. Contact! Flashlights snapped toward them. Teresa broke into a sprint. Adrian followed, lungs burning, shoes slipping on the metal grating. At the end of the catwalk was a short drop onto a loading platform. Teresa jumped without hesitation. Adrian hesitated for half a second, then jumped. He landed hard, pain flaring through his ankle, but he stayed upright. Teresa grabbed his arm, steadying him. You okay? She asked. Yes, he lied. Move. They disappeared between two rows of containers just as gunfire cracked behind them. Not aimed, not yet, but close enough to send a message. They ran until their breaths came ragged, until the sounds faded again into the industrial night. When they finally stopped, hidden beneath a skeletal crane frame, Adrian leaned forward, hands on his knees, chest heaving. Teresa watched him, not with judgment, not with contempt. You didn't let go, she said. He looked up. Of you? Yes. That wasn't an option. The word surprised them both. For a moment, the port fell away. There was only the cold air, the shared exhaustion, and the undeniable shift between them. Whatever this had started as, hostility, leverage, necessity, it was no longer that. They weren't just running anymore. They were bound by the simple, dangerous fact that when it mattered, neither of them had walked away. They hid beneath the crane longer than either of them liked. Not because it was safe, but because moving too soon would be louder than staying still. Adrian sat with his back against a steel support beam, one leg stretched out, the other bent. His ankle throbbed in a steady, disciplined rhythm, like a reminder he couldn't silence. Teresa crouched opposite him, scanning the yard through a narrow gap between containers, her breathing finally slowing. They won't search here immediately, she said. Too exposed. They'll assume we kept running. That assumption will cost them, Adrian replied. She glanced back at him. In the low light, his face looked different, drawn, stripped of the polished detachment she'd first met at the helipad. There was no executive calm now, just focus and something heavier underneath it. Minutes passed, then more. The port resumed its half-life. Engines restarting, radios crackling back into cautious use, men laughing too loudly to pretend nothing was wrong. Teresa finally lowered herself to sit on the cold concrete, back against the container wall. Silence pressed in, uncomfortable now that the immediate danger had receded. You climbed like someone who's done worse than boardrooms, she said. Adrian let out a slow breath. I didn't start there. She waited, didn't push. That, more than anything, loosened something in him. My father was a dock electrician, he said. Different port, different country, same smells. He gestured vaguely. Oil, rust, salt. When he died, the company folded. No severance, no safety net. Teresa's eyes stayed on him, sharp but open. I worked nights, Adrian continued. Accounting during the day, logistics on weekends. I learned early that if you don't harden, someone else decides what you're worth. That's when you stopped seeing people, she said quietly. That's when I stopped surviving, he corrected, and started winning. The words weren't proud. They were factual, almost tired. Teresa leaned her head back against the steel, staring up at the skeletal lattice of the crane above them. I thought you flew in from the sky because you never touched ground. I earned the right to stop touching it, he said. Or so I told myself. For a moment, neither spoke. The night air cut through the heat left by fear and exertion. Then Teresa shifted, reaching into her jacket. Adrian's body tensed instinctively, then relaxed when she pulled out a folded sheet of paper, creased and smudged with grease. I didn't tell you everything, she said. He accepted the paper. A personnel movement log. Names, timestamps, access points. One name circled twice. That's your trader? He asked. Yes. Shift logistics supervisor. Trusted. Invisible. She swallowed. He trained half the yard. Adrian traced the pattern with his finger, and he just transmitted our location. Not exactly, Teresa said. He sent a signal that tells them we're still inside the port. Adrian looked up sharply. You're sure? I intercepted it before it completed, she said. But he knows we're close. As if summoned by the admission, Adrian's phone vibrated once in his pocket. A blocked number. One message. Leave now. This is your last window. Teresa saw his expression change. That him? No, Adrian said, his jaw tightening as he recognized the encrypted header. It's my COO. He's not warning me. He's testing the trap. If I move toward the gate now, his private contractors have a clear shot and a justifiable reason for collateral damage. He typed quickly, rerouting data packets to trace the source. He didn't just want the port closed, Teresa. He wanted a vacancy at the top. He typed quickly, rerouting data packets, masking his signal through a satellite relay he hadn't activated in years. When he finished, he showed her the screen. Your trader isn't working alone, he said. He's subcontracted, paid through 3 shells. The money traces back to a competitor I shut down last quarter. Teresa's jaw tightened. So this was never about the terminal. It was about leverage, Adrian said. And spectacle. Her laugh was short and humorless. They were going to burn this place down with you inside it. Yes. And you still signed the closure order. He didn't look away. Because from where I was standing, this port was already dead. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. Teresa stood abruptly. You don't get to decide that from 30,000 feet. I know, Adrian said. That's why I'm here now. She paced once, then turned back to him. Anger and something far more dangerous tangled together. They're coming, she said. He'll signal again. Louder. Let him, Adrian replied. If he knows we know, he'll make mistakes. She studied him for a long second. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to use me, he said. Same as I've been using systems my whole life. Before she could answer, a sharp electronic chirp cut through the air. Teresa's radio, dead moments ago, flickered to life. Security sweep confirmed, a voice crackled. Warehouse sector moving to lockdown. Teresa met Adrian's eyes. The decision was already made. Once we move, she said, there's no hiding anymore. Adrian rose, testing his injured ankle, then straightened despite the pain. Good. She gave him a hard, almost feral smile. You're either about to get us killed, or expose everyone trying to own this place, he finished. They stepped out from beneath the crane together, no longer fugitives reacting to pressure. They were aligned now. And somewhere in the port, the man who had betrayed them realized, too late, that the signal he'd sent had just locked him into the same hunt. The night thickened around them like a curtain of steel and diesel fumes. Container stacks loomed like monoliths, casting long shadows across the yard. Every sound, footsteps on metal grating, a truck engine revving in the distance, the faint hiss of hydraulic lifts, felt amplified, a warning signal they couldn't ignore. Teresa crouched behind a stack of crates, her eyes scanning the dimly lit space. Adrian followed, moving carefully, his corporate precision now reshaped into physical awareness. Each step was measured, deliberate, because one wrong move could expose them to the men hunting them. "They've brought in heavy support," Teresa whispered. "Private security. Armed. Not here for paperwork." Adrian nodded, noting the patrol patterns. Flashlights swept across the yard, converging, splitting, coordinating. He recognized the methodical precision, not random chaos, but calculated suppression. They weren't looking to arrest, they were looking to eliminate witnesses. "They're trying to make this look like an accident," Adrian said quietly, gesturing toward a stack of containers near the fuel depot. "If they start a fire there, the cameras will confirm our absence." Teresa's jaw tightened. "Then we stop it." They moved, using the shadows, climbing over containers, slipping between forklifts that were temporarily idle. Each movement drew them closer to the center of the blockade, the very area the attackers had been ordered to compromise. Adrian pulled out his tablet, quickly connecting to satellite feeds and rerouting control signals. "I can blind them temporarily," he said, fingers flying over the screen. "The feed loops for 10 minutes. That's enough." Teresa didn't hesitate. She slid into the driver's seat of a dormant forklift, engine growling to life as she maneuvered it between stacks, pushing crates aside to create cover and disrupt the attacker's line of sight. The vehicle's horn blared occasionally, a loud distraction timed perfectly with Adrian's digital interference. "Adrian," Teresa called, her voice low but urgent. "They're moving around the west sector." "I see it," he replied, adjusting the tablet. "If I can push the local alarms to override, they'll be too busy to notice us." Red warning lights flashed on a control panel he'd hacked. For a tense moment, the private security units froze, scanning, communicating, unsure whether the alerts were real or false. That moment of hesitation was all they needed. Teresa swung the forklift around, creating a narrow path through the yard. Adrian ran beside her, guiding her through blind spots she would never have considered without his satellite overlay. Every container they moved, every crate they nudged, became a temporary barrier, a trap. One of the attackers fired. Bullets pinged off steel, ricocheting dangerously close. Adrian ducked instinctively, the sound ringing in his ears. Teresa's eyes narrowed, her grip steady on the controls. "Keep moving," she urged. "We can't stop now." They reached a loading dock, partially covered, partially exposed. Adrian keyed in a series of rapid commands. The alarms cut off, lights flickered. The attackers paused, confused by the sudden digital blackout. Adrian leaned close to Teresa. "Now." With a precise shove of the forklift, she pushed a stack of containers into a choke point, funneling the attackers into a confined path. Adrian sprinted, using the cover, and accessed a terminal hidden under the dock stairs. Fingers flew over keys as he transmitted evidence of the sabotage directly to the central office and Interpol, bypassing local authorities entirely. Teresa covered him, muscles coiled, eyes sharp, ready to strike. Their movements had become a synchronized dance, his mind and her strength, a perfect tandem against overwhelming odds. By the time the attackers realized what had happened, they were trapped in a maze of shifted containers, digital confusion, and strategically blocked pathways. Every advantage they had counted on vanished, replaced by improvisation and quick thinking. Adrian rose from the terminal, breathing hard. "Data's through," he said. Teresa exhaled slowly, her hands still gripping the forklift controls. "Good. Now we get out before they figure it out." For the first time, they allowed themselves a fleeting glance at each other, a silent acknowledgement that they were no longer merely hiding. They were actively fighting back, blending intellect and action, calculation and courage. Outside, the port remained alive, unaware that the tide had shifted. Within the shadows of steel and diesel, Adrian and Teresa had carved a small, imperceptible victory. A blockade turned against those who had laid it, a stand that would save not just their lives, but the very terminal they were sworn to protect. The first light of morning crept over the horizon, washing the port in muted gold. Shadows retreated from the stacks of containers and cranes, revealing a yard still scarred from the night's chaos but intact. Engines idled, but the tension that had gripped every corner of the terminal slowly lifted. Adrian stood at the edge of the main dock, the tablet in his hand now quiet, its mission complete. He surveyed the port, the cranes, the warehouses, the fuel lanes. Everything they had fought for, all the precision and danger, had preserved this place. The evidence he had transmitted would reach the authorities, and the attackers, the real culprits, would face justice. Teresa approached from behind, dust and oil streaking her face, hair disheveled. Her eyes, sharp as ever, held a spark that had not been there when she first met him on the helipad. The exhaustion on both of them was palpable, but it was overshadowed by a shared relief. "You did it," she said quietly. "No," Adrian corrected, his voice soft but steady. "We did it. Together." For a moment, they simply watched the sunrise, the pale light reflecting off the steel and water, the port alive with the first official activity of the day. Trucks started rolling, cranes lifted containers, and the air was filled with the low hum of logistics resuming. Life, stubborn and persistent, returned to the terminal. Adrian turned to Teresa. "I want you to stay," he said. "Deputy manager. You'll have full authority here." She shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "No, this is your world, but mine is here. I stay where the work is real." He nodded, respect, and something unspoken passing between them. They had started as enemies, forced together by circumstance, and had emerged as partners, bound by trust, shared danger, and the knowledge that each had the other's back when it counted most. Adrian glanced at the distant office of the Port Authority, knowing that in hours, legal matters would take over, but this victory, the survival, the truth exposed, belonged to them. "Then we go our separate ways," he said, tone light, but his eyes lingered. "For now," Teresa smirked, adjusting her cap against the morning sun. "For now." He took one last look at the port, inhaling the salt and diesel-laced air, feeling the pulse of the place he had once seen only in reports. With a final nod to Teresa, he stepped back, ready to resume his role as CEO, but forever changed by the night, by her, and by the knowledge that this story was far from over. The dock buzzed back to life, but in the golden light of dawn, Adrian and Teresa shared a silent promise. The battle for truth, for justice, for the port, and perhaps for each other, was only just beginning. Thank you for listening to the story. Write your thoughts in the comments.